Joey Gallo.
Welcome in to the NSFW Dynasty podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Dave Reed, joined by my co-host, Ryan Wilkinson.
Hey guys, good to be back.
That's right. Unfortunately, we don't have Joey here right now. It is around Thanksgiving. We're 2 days out, and the holidays have a way of kind of taking over your life this time of year. So it's unfortunate Thanksgiving's taking over right now, but it's all right. We got this pod, right, Ryan?
Yeah, Joe and I have been switching week to week here, but hopefully we'll get both of us back on next week.
And I don't. I'm your rock. I'll be here every week.
Yeah, he's always here.
I'm always here. I got the software, so I have to be. But as I mentioned, Thanksgiving is this week, and that means it's a super long week of football to really drag out some of the most decisive matchups in your dynasty and fantasy leagues. There are 3 games on Thursday, 1 game on Friday, on Black Friday, 11 on Sunday, and 1 final matchup on Monday. There are no teams on bye this week, which is ridiculous because then we have 6 teams on bye next week, which is pretty brutal when you're trying to get a playoff spot.
Yeah, for sure. Huge pivotal week of fantasy football. Everyone has their full lineup, so no excuses, and we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, most leagues only have about 3 games left before the playoff starts, so you're really trying to get into the your last playoff spot. And in our league, and we'll get into it more later, but we have divisions. We have 3 divisions, and the first 3 weeks of the season and the last 3 weeks of the season, you play your division, and the winner of your division automatically gets into the playoffs. So it's going to be a slugfest over these last 3 weeks. How are you feeling about that, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm pretty nervous. We're right in the middle of it, so I think you're feeling a little more comfortable than we are. But yeah, it should be a good 3 weeks. I think a lot's going to change.
I never feel comfortable. I have some of the worst luck when it comes to some fantasy. So even with this lead, if I lose out, I could probably get the boot still.
We'll see. I mean, you can never feel comfortable in fantasy football in general. So
I don't. I have some PTSD on some losses as recent as last year. But before that, we're going to get into quickly hit up some of the injuries that happened this past week because we have some major ones, and these are really going to derail some fantasy teams and some real NFL teams as well. So the first one, it's the biggest one. It was on Thursday night. Is Joe Burrow? He's having season-ending ligament surgery on his throwing wrist too, which you don't want to see. We all saw it when he came out. Did not look good. I mean, he should be back next year, but that has major implications across the board. Geno Smith had an elbow contusion on his throwing arm. He's currently day-to-day, but they play on Thursday, so it's a little if he's gonna be able to play on Thanksgiving or not, and that has a lot of implications as well. On the same team, Kenneth Walker had an oblique strain and actually left the game. It sounds like it might be a grade 1 oblique strain, which means he should only miss 1 to 2 weeks. But he's definitely going to miss Thursday this week versus San Francisco, which opens up the door for Charbonnet. Aaron Jones has an MCL sprain. He's likely going to miss multiple weeks. He's also on the older side. This is kind of becoming a lost season for him, and who knows what his career looks like moving forward. My boy, Devon Achane, came back after waiting so long and immediately left. He re-aggravated his knee injury. Sounds like it wasn't too bad, but they were playing it cautious since it was the same knee that he hurt and he missed time for. But they play on Friday, so again, we'll see if they play cautious and make him sit. But it sounds like he shouldn't miss more than 1 week so far. Salvon Ahmed, which surprised me today, he's done for the season with a foot injury, which is crazy because it came in after Achane went down and looked pretty good, but he's done. Deontay Foreman left the game with an ankle injury, opened up the door for Khalil Herbert to get a lot of play. Cooper Kupp had a low ankle sprain early in the game again. He might miss a week. It doesn't sound too serious. He could play this week. It's something to monitor. But with Kupp, this is like the ride with him apparently. But that opened up the door for Puka Nacua to have a big day. But apparently he left the game, had a shoulder injury later in that game as well, and he's day-to-day too, so you got to monitor that. Odell had a pretty big game as well on Thursday, but he had an AC joint sprain, so it sounds like he should play, but we'll see if it hinders him. But even bigger in that game as well as Mark Andrews had a high ankle sprain, likely out for the rest of at least the fantasy season. He could maybe come back for the NFL playoffs. But That's a major, major blow, especially in our league where it's tight end premium. But any of these major injuries stick out to you, Rye?
Yeah, so obviously Joe Burrow is the biggest one. Such a roller coaster of a season if you're a Burrow owner. He started week one, didn't look like himself the first few weeks. We talked about whether or not he would be a QB1 this year. Decided it kind of depended on how he looked after the bye week. Actually came back and looked great after the bye week. Looked healthy, started playing well, and then hurt his wrist. And like you said, he looked like he was in pain, so it didn't look
Yeah.
good. Done for the season now. Definitely hurts if he's your QB, but hopefully at this point he just takes the time, gets healthy, and comes back for next season. And then the other huge one is definitely Mark Andrews, like you said, tight end premium league. Um, there wasn't too many tight ends at the top, but he was definitely one of them. So losing him for the rest of the season hurts unless you have some depth at tight end. And then, Miami running backs feel like it's just kind of a roller
Oh,
coaster there, but Mozart
killing
keeps
me.
holding on somehow. So we'll see what happens with Achane. I thought it was more serious than it sounds like it is. So hopefully he comes back this week or next week and
I need
is
them.
good for the rest of the season.
I know it's these are the this. I mean, this is the fun and the downside of fantasy and dynasty is like these injuries, especially at this point of the year, where like every matchup matters, like every win matters, and not only does it stink to lose a player for like future weeks, but when you're having a matchup and now this guy, especially like if it's early in the game, like Achan and Cup, where they each had like a point each, and then they're just done the rest of the game. That's basically getting goose. You're just like, how do I survive this matchup now? So you could potentially lose because of that injury, and then it makes it so much harder going forward. But this also highlights the need in dynasty when you have the deep benches to really just like take shots on backups, like because it these injuries also show that there's a lot of opportunity. Like Isaiah Likely, he's going to step up for Andrews. Who knows if he's going to be the main beneficiary or if he'll be the top tight end, but maybe they start targeting the wide receivers more. But that was a guy you were not starting at all, and you're just trying to keep in your bench. And now he can help make you win a championship or at least give you that last playoff push. And when you're targeting trades, like I always, whenever I'm trying to do a trade, I'm always trying to see if I can get like one or two smaller pieces that seem like they're not valuable at the time, but you see a potential path forward. Just because you never know, like these are the things that can kind of shift the fantasy fortunes for you. Is these backups when injuries happen.
Yeah, and we talk about it every week, and this injury list is always pretty long. I feel like we're mentioning at least 10 players a week every single week. So a lot of backups end up pretty relevant. Like you said, Isaiah Likely, I think he actually did pretty well the last time he played too. So, maybe he ends up a top 10 tight end the rest of the way or something like that. So it's huge to have that depth on your bench.
Yeah, I mean in Miami, obviously Mostert is still a starter, but can't just be all him. So like Jeff Wilson is back,
Yeah.
like back from the dead. These guys, it's pretty wild. And like even Charbonnet, people who drafted him as a rookie have been waiting for this opportunity, and he's been getting more and more snaps. And now this is what you like weren't exactly hoping for, but one thing you drafted him knowing that Walker could get hurt, and if he did, Charbonnet would show up, and it's happening here. So yeah, and honestly, injuries every week. That's why we've been able to do this segment every week, is because it never stops. But there are some positives coming back. Kyron Williams will be playing this week in week 12. So the Rams are just losing people, but at least one player is coming back. And Justin Jefferson was still not positive if he's coming back. And apparently, so he had his 21-day window opened up from the IR that he has to be activated, otherwise he's done for the season. I thought it sounded like initially, because he's missed 2 weeks, that if he didn't play this week, that wouldn't be the case. Apparently, he can miss this week and then be activated after this week, and they have a bye next week. So they could choose to play it really safe and make him sit one more week. So we'll see what happens there. Keep an eye on there, but it'll be interesting if he gets in for week 12.
Yeah, and they're doing pretty well with Dobbs as their quarterback now. You think they probably want to get him back. So I would assume, maybe they play it safe for one more week, but I think he definitely will be coming back at some point. And then Kyron Williams, great that he's back. The Rams also dropped Henderson. So he looks like he's going to have a full workload as soon as he gets back, which is also great. Whenever a running back is out for that long, you got to worry if the backups end up stealing a bit of the pie going forward, but it sounds like Kyron's going to have a full workload from here on out. So,
Yeah. I mean, Dobbs has been great. He almost won again. That story is still wild, but them winning is the only reason I think Justin Jefferson has a chance of coming back this year. But yeah, I mean, a few other games to call out here. Not an injury, but a player that you're not going to be with going forward. And someone in our league actually traded for him right before this week. Is Zach Wilson has been benched finally for the Jets, and it was time. And honestly, it's not like I think what's the guy's name, Tim Boyle, who is now going to be backing him up. I don't think it's going to get better, but they had to finally stop believing Zach Wilson. You wish that they made this choice before the trade deadline and acquired someone like a Dobbs, who was out there, or Winston, or literally anyone else, because their offense, I forgot, it was like 40-something possessions. They won without a touchdown. Garrett Wilson had negative yards before his final catch of the game, and he finished 2 for 9. Breece Hall, even on the ground, has been brutal. I think he has 130 yards over the past 5 games total. He's been getting it done through the air, which has been keeping him as an RB1. But man, the Jets are just brutal there.
Yeah, hasn't been great. You do have to ask the question though, why make that decision now when you said Tim Boyle's most likely not going to be any better? If they had just made the decision a couple of weeks ago, they could have had a real shot. But now I don't even really get it. Tim Boyle's probably not that much better.
Yeah, I'm starting to think if Robert Saleh is really the coach of the future there. They may have to move on there. He's definitely on the hot seat because it's been bad. And I don't see Rodgers coming back this year. What is he coming back to at this point? Why risk it?
Yeah, I know there's been a little bit of talk about that. I would find it really hard to believe that Rodgers is actually going to come back this year, especially with the situation that's going on there.
Risk getting hurt again? There's absolutely no point.
I don't know why you would. So, but flipping to a bit more positive, if we look at the Texans, Stroud did throw 3 picks, so that wasn't great, but still put up yards and touchdowns for fantasy. Tank Dell, Dave, I know you're a huge fan. 27 fantasy points, so
dominating.
He's been dominating recently, and Singletary has been looking pretty good. I know there was some talk preseason that maybe he would steal a bit of a role there, but he's been looking great as the main back here now.
Yeah, I mean, we did talk that Singletary could get more play than we thought, and then it didn't seem that way going in, but Pierce was not efficient at all, and then obviously get hurt, and didn't seem like the run game could work at all, and all of a sudden, the past 2 games, Singletary's blowing up and looking great, but really, it's Stroud had, obviously, the picks, but still a solid game. He still threw for plenty of yards and touchdowns, but ultimately won the game. But Tank Dell, again, he is looking like a future star, showing out, and he's tied to Stroud going forward. He had it, and he had the production, if not more production than all the top first-round picks as well. He just was at a smaller school and didn't get the draft capital. Still was a day 2 pick, so it was all right. But he is looking like he's probably a top 5, if not top 3 wide receiver out of this rookie class right now. And even if guys like Nico Collins, it looks pretty good. It's crazy because going into the season, it didn't seem like they had a lot of weapons there, and they traded away this upcoming year's first round pick to move up to get, I think it was Will Anderson on the defensive side. And I was like, all right, this team is going to be rough for years. Nope, they're currently 6-4 and might be in the playoffs already. So it's pretty incredible what's going on in Houston.
Yeah, I was just going to say they're in the playoff hunt, which you really don't see too often with a rookie quarterback. So it's pretty cool to see, rookie quarterback doing great, wide receivers kind of coming out of nowhere, like you said, and Singletary now looking like a great lead back. So it'll be interesting to see. I'd love to see him make the playoffs and see what they can do.
Yeah, no, they're exciting. And honestly, with that, get me excited. I kind of want to talk about some other good players here, some other big-name quarterbacks. And there's one in particular. We're going to move over to our weekly awards. But there's one I'm a little antsy because
you can't wait.
I've waited weeks for this, man. Weeks. Smash William Award. Trevor Lawrence, baby. Trevor Lawrence. We did it. Finally, Trevor, the QB1 on the week.
Only,
36 points.
only took 11 weeks, Dave.
Oh, it took 11 weeks, man, after like a brutal week last week coming out of the bye. I think he had like 2 points last week. But this is what happens when ETN does not steal all the damn touchdowns. Thank you. Trevor Lawrence rushed for 2 touchdowns this time, and then he threw for an extra 2 in the air with another 262 yards to go with it. So 4 total touchdowns. And one of the reasons of the stat line as well, not only was he getting obviously running more and around the goal line, but Ridley was showing up. Ridley had a huge game and finally looked like the wide receiver one that we thought he was after week 1. He had the 2 touchdowns that Trevor Lawrence threw. So if Ridley can start ascending to that wide receiver one, that at every quarterback, you need that guy. Like that's really what levels people up, is having that wide receiver one, and he can start running around a bit more. Trevor Lawrence is going to get back into the top 10. Again, in Dynasty, I've never wavered on him being a top 10 quarterback, but this was a huge bounce back game for him, and I'm hoping they continue to rely more on him than just the ground game going forward. But my boy Trevor Lawrence, we're back.
Yeah, it was definitely a huge week for him. He looked good. I know you've been waiting all season for that.
Oh, and Joe, that's why really the reason Joe is not on the pod. He knew that. He looked at the show dog. He's like, nah, I'm not coming out.
He knew that would be talked about, and he couldn't be on the pod.
Couldn't do it.
Smart man. But I'm going to actually talk about another quarterback who I'm giving the Smash Williams Award to. I actually went with Justin Herbert. I feel like we've talked about Keenan Allen a bit, but we really haven't talked about Justin Herbert. And he, I feel like kind of quietly, is the QB3 on the year. He had 31 fantasy points, 260 yards, 2 touchdowns through the air, also rushed for 73 yards. He did have a fumble. But as Dave's going to talk about later, he actually led the team in rushing. So he's been having a great couple weeks. The last 2 weeks, he was the QB2 in week 10, QB3 in week 11. He's had over 30 fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 weeks. So, you know, you're getting the production pretty much week after week. And like I said, he's QB3 on the year. And we haven't really talked about it too much. So huge performance for him. And you're having a huge year if you have him on your team.
Yeah, and honestly, he was someone I think a lot of people were high on because they had the weapons, but the reason why they're really showing up too is the defense stinks. The defense is like constantly losing games for these Chargers. Like Herbert's doing his part. I think they lost Bosa midway through that game, but the head coach Brandon Staley is also on the hot seat right now because this has been the MO for the Chargers. They lead early on and they lose games at the end.
Yeah, I think they're 4-6. So that, you know, real life football, they're actually not doing too great. But fantasy wise, if you have Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen, you've been happy.
Yeah, and it's also not helping that guys like Quentin Johnson, the rookie who we've talked about before, who I think kind of stinks. It really stinks. He dropped a game-winning touchdown for them. He was wide open and would have won the game for them. And he's just got to give Herbert a little bit more help. Mike Williams going down didn't help, and we'll get into more of his weapons later. But Herbert himself is doing everything he possibly can.
Yeah, for sure. He's looked great.
Yeah, but moving on. Ryan, let's have you jump in actually on who your He's All That award is going to go to.
Yeah, so I gave my He's All That award to Brian Robinson, not to be confused with John Robinson, who I know we've talked a ton about. But he's just turned into a solid depth piece who, you know, has been a stud if you have him on your team. It was a rough day for the Commanders, who had, I believe it was 6 total turnovers and lost to the Giants, who are also a disaster. But
they can't beat the Giants. It's
yeah,
I don't know why.
It's crazy. But B-Rob finished with 15 fantasy points still, 73 yards, and more importantly, he had 7 catches on 9 targets for 58 yards. I know Gibson was out, but it's encouraging to see Robinson getting the targets regardless. And whether he may actually be a stud or not, he's quietly become the RB4 on the year, which I feel like is pretty crazy for him to be that high, top 5 running back this season. He was drafted as a depth piece, and man, you have been rewarded if you have him on your team. He's averaging 19 points a game. So I felt like it was time for him to get an award as well.
No, I agree. And the thing that's changed for him, you saw it last week, and you mentioned it. It's the targets and the receptions. Like going like into the season and all last season, he was the two down back, the guy who's getting all the work on the ground, and Gibson was supposed to be the receiving back. And Gibson played, I believe, last week. He was hurt, so he missed this week. But last week he played, and Robinson still had 6 receptions for 119 yards and a touchdown. A lot of it on one big reception, but they're now looking at him, and Howell's checking down to him, and they're actually throwing a little bit more downfield to him. If he's going to get that, that's going to raise his floor so much higher with that type of targets count. So, like, no matter what, you're getting half a point for reception. Every catch is worth more than a rush, and you're usually already not always, but usually past the line of scrimmage if you're catching them, so you're getting points already added to that. So yeah, if he's going to be this involved in the pass game, you got to start viewing him as a top 15 back, and obviously he's already a top 5 on the year, so pretty impressive.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, targets are huge for a running back, and we've seen it time and time again. The pass catching running backs become more and more valuable, and he's getting those targets now. So we'll see how he finishes the year, but regardless, he's had a huge year.
Yeah. And another guy who's stepping up and having a big year, and this guy's career has been a bit of a roller coaster, but I don't think anyone has drafted Brandon Ayuk this year thinking that he would be their wide receiver 1. He's probably more of your wide receiver 3 when you're building your team in most leagues. But this guy's legit, and he's fulfilling on that first-round draft capital that the San Francisco 49ers put onto him a few years back. This week, he was the wide receiver 4. And he's the wide receiver 14 on the year, after putting up 5 for 156 and a touchdown this week. Just explosive game. The one thing is he doesn't really demand the target share you want every wide receiver 1. That's kind of just like part of the offense that they have in San Francisco. They don't throw a ton. And this does result in potentially more volatility that you'd like out of your wide receiver 1. But as I mentioned, he's probably your wide receiver 2 or 3 on your team, putting up big weeks. But the targets that he get are just more valuable than you would get on other teams. They love to set the run and do a run the play action and hit him on a deep shot, which he's typically open for. And this has been a trend over the past 5 weeks, seeing his yards per target increase each week. He went from 7.6 to 9.5 to 12.1 to 18.3 to now 26 this past week. And this isn't a fluke either. He started the year with this trend. He had 16.1 in week 1 and 24.7 in week 3. This is the formula that works for San Francisco, and he's absolutely their true wide receiver 1. And Dynasty, a guy who I'd be trying to get if there was any discount available still, because I think he's still on the rise. And the thing you like to see also about San Francisco is this past week, their targets were basically just to their 4 main weapons. It went to Kittle, it went to CMC, it went to Ayuk, and went to Debo. Like, no one else had a catch on that team, and you love to see that concentration of targets.
Yeah, I mean, he's looked great all year. We actually tried to get him off Canales a couple of weeks ago, but Canales was pretty hard on him being part of the rebuild, like you said. But yeah, I mean, he's also connected to Brock Purdy, who has turned out to be a great quarterback, and he's on a great team. So yeah, going forward, he should be a solid piece to have on your team.
Yeah, absolutely love him. But moving on to the Doug Flutie Hail Mary Award, let's start with you, because these next 2 guys were pivotal in my matchup that I had with Joe this past week, which, again, another reason Joe probably wasn't on the pod. I beat him this week in our league. But but Joe had
many reasons.
So many reasons. But Joe had the guy that you're about to speak about.
Yeah, so I'm about to talk about a Buffalo Bills receiver. You would think it would potentially be Stephon Diggs, but it is not. The Doug Flutie Hail Mary Award is going to Khalil Shakir. He finished with 3 catches, which is not great, but he had 115 yards and a touchdown. Most of it came on an 85-yard touchdown catch.
That'll do it.
That'll do it. But the Bills have a new offensive coordinator, Joe Brady, so it's encouraging to see him getting involved with a new guy calling the shots. It was a career best performance, but if you were fortunate enough to start him in your flex, you were rewarded. It's interesting to note, too, that since week 7, he's had at least 4 targets in every game except 1. And prior to week 7, he had literally 0 or 1 target each of the first 6 games. So he's been a lot more involved. If you're involved in a passing attack with Josh Allen and the Bills, that's a great thing right now. So if his usage stays up and he stays in the 4 to 5 target range, he could be a decent flex option moving forward. And like you said, Joe was fortunate enough to start him, so he did actually get the production out of him, although it didn't pay off in the end.
I know. Joe, and I'll give Joe credit. I believe, actually traded up later in our starter draft to get Shakir, so he definitely saw the upside there. And when that 81-yard touchdown was at the end of the game, and I was like, now I'm toast, because I was projected to win, and once that happened, I no longer was projected to win. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Shakir against the Jets is the one that breaks off this run. Um, and he also had another guy who ripped up a long run that I'm going to speak about in a minute or two. So I was like, you got to be kidding me. This team's blown up. But fortunately, my award to the Hail Mary stepped up for me on Monday night to save my week and win my matchup. And that's Justin Watson. Starting any wide receiver for the Chiefs, and I think many of us know, that is just a Hail Mary in itself. It's an absolute crapshoot in Kansas City this year. And the fact that this was, as I mentioned, the Monday night football game, and if your matchup, like mine, as I mentioned, depended on it, then you're, again, throwing up a Hail Mary. You just need anyone to get some points for you. And also, the weather was brutal there. But fortunately, he did, and he did it early, and he did it somewhat often, and he scored the first touchdown of the game, which automatically put me in the lead, which thank God I didn't have to sweat out. And he didn't stop there. He ended up ending the game going 5 for 53 and a touchdown on 11 targets. He was the clear-cut wide receiver one this week. I'm not saying he's going to be that going forward, but this past week, he was clear-cut wide receiver one. He had more targets than Kelsey. And I do think this was actually more based up on the matchup and what they saw against the Eagles. The Eagles were blanketing Kelsey all night long. And also catching only 5 receptions on 11 targets. Not really the best ratio you want to see there. But again, the weather was rough, and he did have a couple drops. But that being said, they were drawing up plays for Watson on some deep passes. He may have ran the wrong route on one of them, but he's always been on the field a ton this year. And no one has run away with that top wide receiver job in KC yet. So I'll be keeping an eye on him this upcoming week to see if he gets another healthy share of targets, because he could become a more consistent flex option if so.
Yeah, like you said, we've been trying to figure out who that wide receiver one for the Chiefs is going to be. I feel like we've talked about, Tony to start the year. Then it was Rice for a little bit. Now maybe it's Watson. It's always Kelsey, but who that actual wide receiver one will be, we really don't know. But if you're lucky enough to start whoever it is that week, it probably pays off.
Came up big.
Yeah. And 5 catches for 11 at this point is pretty much the standard for Chiefs wide receivers.
Yeah.
So, no one can catch anything. I think what's his name dropped like a game-winning.
MVS.
Game-winning catch at the end. So
in the end zone, he was over 3.
Yeah, no one can catch a pass there.
Yeah, 5 for 11 is actually good when it comes to receivers. There,
yeah, that's good percentage-wise for the Chief receivers. Yeah.
Oh, brutal. But Watson, thank you for giving me that dub. But it almost didn't happen because, as I mentioned, Joey had this other guy who was on his team who has been a darling of mine. But let me set it up for you first, because we're getting into our Ferrari for a Trailer Park Award. So this is, you're showing up despite a bad situation, team, matchup, whatever. This guy has it all. So if I told you had to start a running back against the Browns D, that has been dominating, you probably would not be that excited. Maybe look for another option. If I told you it was going to be in an AFC North divisional matchup, which are typically ugly slugfests, you'd say, yeah, I'd rather pass. And finally, if I said that player would only get 9 carries and was tied to the Steelers offense that would only put up 10 points, you might consider just not starting anyone in that roster spot. But, however, as I mentioned, Jaylen Warren, who been talked about since the preseason, keeps dominating. He looks like a top 20 running back moving forward, and the clear-cut RB1 for the Steelers. On those 9 carries that I mentioned, he went for 129 yards and a score, 74 yards on one touchdown run there, but he also added 3 receptions for 16 yards through the air. And again, this is against a stout defense that you try to avoid. And he ran with some intensity. He was stiff-arming people, tossing guys for extra yards. He's undoubtedly, no matter what the matchup is, a must-start moving forward. So despite everything I just mentioned, this guy was an absolute Ferrari.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. The other side of the coin is Najee Harris, who had 12 carries for 35 yards. So I think, the Steelers might be recognizing that Warren is the better back, and maybe they'll start to go with him a little bit more going forward. And if they do, he looks like he'll have some huge numbers. So definitely performing in the bit of the mess that is the Steelers right now.
Yeah.
And
Well, I
yeah,
want to pass it to you though, Rye, because
I
this
got
is it, man.
I got another team that is a bit of a disaster.
A little bit.
Definitely a trailer park, but we're talking about the Giants, and their season is over. They've been a complete disaster. They were 2-8 going into Week 11.
I wish they were still 2 wins.
Yeah, but they now sit at 3-8 because of Syracuse's very own Tommy DeVito.
Let's go, Syracuse. Go Orange.
Hughes is in the house. He finished with 246 yards and 3 touchdowns in the win over the Commanders. He dropped a beautiful pass to Barkley. I know you
Mm-hmm.
commented on it, but it looked really good. His second full game, he was QB7 on the week. He'll likely get to finish out the season, and he may end up being someone you can throw in your super flex with bye weeks and injuries piling up. So we'll see how he does the rest of the way, but it was a great game for him. And, who knows? Maybe he can be in the Giants' future.
Yeah. I mean, I will say the content around DeVito is just hilarious. All these Soprano memes are coming back up. He's even doing the Italian hand, like, when he scores a touchdown. He lives at home with his parents still. Like, it's the most Italian New Jersey prototype you've ever heard of before. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's definitely another cool story. I feel like there's been a couple cool quarterback stories this year, and
Well, the
Dobbs is still
stars are
holding
hurt,
on.
so
Yeah, true.
it's only stores like, oh, this guy coming from nowhere, yeah, because everyone else who's is
Yeah,
in the IR right now.
yeah, they've been performing though, so it's crazy.
It is. It's absolutely nuts. It's cool seeing guys get these shots too, because
Yeah,
we play a fantasy game, and these guys like kind of dream about this, never thinking they get their shot, and they're showing up when they do. So it's really cool to see.
yeah, no, it's awesome. But then there are some guys that are letting us down, Dave. Who you
Yeah,
got?
yeah. So this guy has. Speaking of stories, this guy was undrafted, I believe. So he had a good story in itself, but it's seeming like it might be coming to an end somewhat soon. So Austin Eckler, he's playing against a bad run D in Green Bay Packers. You just mentioned Najee stinks. Well, Najee last week ran for 82 yards and 5.1 yards a carry last week. So you're expecting going into this week that Eckler was going to have a monster game. And unfortunately, you came away very underwhelmed. He put up only 6 fantasy points, and that was on going for 10 carries for 64 yards on the ground. So you're thinking, oh, 6.4 yards a carry, not that bad, but he had one rush of 37 yards. You remove that, he was only 9 yards per carry there. And again, only on 9 other touches from there. So you don't want to see 10 rushes because that's a scary low number. Herbert did rush a ton. He did go 8 for 73. But you're thinking, okay, Eckler, not that many rushes. That's okay. He gets a lot of work through the air. This is pretty typical for him. Nope, not this week. He only had 3 targets, and that yielded 2 catches for 6 yards. Throw in the fact that he also lost a fumble. He just had an absolutely brutal day. Also, though, if you watch it, he did not look like his explosive self. And you're starting to question now in his age 28 season, is the RB cliff coming for him? And a guy like Eckler, it's going to come very quick. It's going to be steep, a very steep drop off. He was already a guy in Dynasty. If you have him, you're kind of trying to, if you're rebuilding, you're definitely trying to sell him to competing teams. But if you're even in the mix, you're knowing like, gosh, should I just ride this guy to the ground? Because it's coming, and it's not going to be a surprise to anyone. However, I do think no matter what direction your team's going, you might want to start floating out offers to see if you can kind of flip him on his name value still, because that cliff might be happening come the playoffs and may not be able to get you to that chip. So when the cliff comes for these running backs, it comes quick. And honestly, this game was a massive letdown, and it's starting to have me concerned.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we talked about his quarterback, Justin Herbert, earlier, who's been looking amazing and dominating and putting up huge fantasy numbers. So it was a big down game for Eckler. He usually does catch a lot of passes. I think he will rebound a little bit there. I think he probably can get the rest of the year out of him. But like you said, it's definitely a little bit concerning, and most likely going forward, his value is going to start to drop at some point here soon.
Yeah. But one guy whose value is impossible to predict, and I just don't think I could ever start him again, is your award winner here.
Yeah, and I gave him the old nickname, Gabe Goose Egg David, because
Jesus.
not only did he finish with 0 fantasy points, he didn't receive a single target in Week 11.
You check the box score. You're like, did he play?
I literally had to look it up because I thought I missed something. I thought maybe he got injured, but nope, he played 88% of the snaps.
Jesus
Um,
Christ. How do you not get a target?
Not a single target. He's the wide receiver too. Josh Allen had a great week. The Bills looked good. It's just been a roller coaster for Davis owners. He had 12 targets in week 9 for 19 fantasy points, or in week 8. Followed that up with a goose egg in week 9. Then he had 6 targets for 8 fantasy points in week 10, and he followed that up with a goose egg in week 11. So you're likely starting him unless you have a deep bench, but you really don't feel good about it going forward. And we've talked about some other guys that if you have them, maybe you throw in to, overtake Davis in your lineup because you may be getting a goose egg.
Yeah, you keep him on your team because there aren't many players that can put up 102 any given week, and he can. But he can also, as you know, put up nothing. And he is the type of guy where you're like, I'm the dog here. I just need an upside shot, knowing that the floor is 0, and you just throw him in, and you hope for the best. But God, that is just brutal.
Yeah, it really depends what you need from him. If you're going for that home run, you throw him in your lineup. But if you have someone on your bench that can get you 5 to 10 points and you're competing, you might start to consider putting that person in over Davis because there's a real chance you end up with 0.
Yeah, it stinks too because as I mentioned, you can't drop him, so he's just burning a roster spot. You're terrified to start him. And even if you trade it, I don't even know what you could get in a trade for him at all. He has to be packaged as maybe a sweetener, just be like, oh, hey, your bench stinks. Here, take this upside shot. Or it's more like, please, I don't want to think about starting him anymore. Please take him off my hands. Just save me from the mental struggle.
Yeah, I think it might be more that it's someone's just going to get sick of him, want him off their roster, and take what they can get because most people aren't going to be buying him right now.
No, not at all. But another wide receiver who I'm beginning to sour on completely. I wasn't that high on coming into the year, but Marquise Hollywood Brown. Starting to think he's maybe not that guy, and that's why I'm giving him the "You're Not That Guy" award. He had only 2.2 points on 2 for 18 this week on 5 targets, and that's after last week he went 1 for 28 on 4 targets. He hasn't eclipsed 50 yards since week 5. He is just the wide receiver 34 in the year, and his best finish on any week so far is the wide receiver 17. Some of this was attributed to quarterback play earlier in the season. Granted, some of those Dobbs was looking great, but he did have a couple of claim tune. But you were thinking when Kyler comes back, it's going to fix things. But Kyler's been back the past 2 weeks, and then you have not seen an uptick in his production at all. If anything, he's taken a step back. This past week, Greg Dortch and Trey McBride had more targets. Last week, McBride, Rondell Moore, and Michael Wilson had more targets. And also this past week, Michael Wilson did not play, so he still might be behind him on the pecking order there. And I will say Murray does look a bit rusty throwing the ball, but it doesn't seem like Hollywood is beating defenses the way he has in previous years. And I was listening to this other pod, and they were mentioning that Hollywood historically has been better at beating man coverage. That's really where he's made his money on. But the league this past year has kind of made a shift more to playing zone coverage more so, which is why you see guys like Puka Nacua, who's more of a zone beater, excelling this year. And that shift has negatively impacted Hollywood clearly. Looking beyond this year, too, he's a free agent going to the offseason, and I'm not sure they bring him back, especially because they're going to have a high draft pick, and they may draft one of the very, very talented rookie wide receivers coming in. And wherever he signs, I don't think he's going to be a team's wide receiver 1 either. This is a guy who, coming to year, had the potential to be a top 15 wide receiver in Dynasty, but honestly, I think the floor might be falling out beneath him pretty quickly. So no longer that guy. I'd be trying to get out from him if I could.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you giving him that award. I was higher on him. I thought he would have a great year. And like you said, it was blamed on the quarterback play, but now looking at the quarterback, it was Dobbs who's actually having a great year. So
Yeah.
you can't blame it too much on that. And now Murray's back. And I think owners thought with Murray back, they'd see an instant uptick. It hasn't happened yet. Maybe it comes, but you're running out of time here. And with him being a free agent next year, it's definitely up in the air on his situation going forward. So definitely not great.
Yeah, I mean, if wherever he signs, he'll be at best the wide receiver 2 on that team too. So who knows where he goes?
Yeah. And then I'm going to give it to a quarterback who we also talked a little bit about the Steelers, but Kenny Pickett is my "you're not that guy,"
He's
and I
he's
don't
bad.
believe he's won the award yet, but he definitely deserved it after Week 11. He threw for 99 yards and 0 touchdowns.
This might be
He,
the Pickett Award.
yeah, we might have to change it.
Yeah,
Although I don't know, it was the Mac Jones
it
Award
was Mac
before. I
Jones.
still kind of stick by
True.
that, but Kenny Pickett has thrown for 1 touchdown over the last 5 games combined. He's averaging 9 points a game as a quarterback. It's been rough for him, although somehow the Steelers are 6-4, which is kind of crazy. And like you said, they actually had a chance to win the game in Week
It's all
11.
Tomlin. It's all Tomlin.
Yeah, it's definitely not Pickett.
Yeah.
The Steelers did just fire Matt Canada, so maybe we'll see some type of improvement there from Pickett. But as of right now, he doesn't look like a startable NFL quarterback, and definitely is not a startable fantasy quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, firing Canada was like, I don't know, 8 weeks overdue. I don't think he's going to take a step back. That guy had no imagination, and it's been hurting the rest of the wide receiver corps. I think Pickens alone will probably benefit the most by the Canada firing, but
Yeah.
yeah, Pickett doesn't look good. He looks like a career backup. If I had to say so myself, knowing as a Giants fan what those look like.
Yeah. Although you have DeVito now, so you can't really say that anymore, you know?
He was the backup. We've seen a lot of backups this year from the Giants. So,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
true. But yeah, Pickett just hasn't looked great. So
Yeah, not great. But yeah, those were the awards. Man, we always end on a sour note. I gotta figure out a way to transition better on a positive note on that. But we are gonna dive into our a little updates on our league. As I mentioned, we're getting towards the end of the regular season for Dynasty, but this upcoming week is our trade deadline. So we have one more week to get trades in. But you've already started to see a flurry of trades coming through. We had 3 this past week. We're gonna hit on some of them. So the first trade that we had in our league, it was a pretty big one that honestly, I was a little upset because I was discussing with both these teams the key piece of these trades on my own, and they both led me on, and then traded with each other instead. But it was Scott traded Brees Hall and a 2024 third to Harry, and to Harry and Dan, and Harry and Dan traded Geno Smith, Keenan Allen, and a 2024 second, which will be Dan and Harry's. So it should be actually pretty early 2024 second. So, Ron, what are your thoughts on that?
yeah, pretty big trade. I know we had talked to Dan and Harry about Keenan Allen a little bit. I knew they were trying to ship him, so I'm not surprised to see the trade happen. But I think on paper, I would favor Scott a little bit. He gave up Brees Hall, but he's moving up around in 2024. And like you said, it should be a pretty early second round pick. And then he's getting Keenan Allen and Geno Smith. Geno Smith did pick up an injury and maybe doesn't play this week, but going forward, he's a serviceable quarterback. Keenan Allen has been dominating the targets for the Chargers, and we've just talked about Justin Herbert a bunch. So I like him there. And then the Jets, like we talked about, it's just a disaster situation. So Hall just hasn't had the value that he would have, but obviously you're trading for him on the hope that it turns around next year and going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I love this trade overall, and it's like there's big names, but it makes sense for both teams, and there's a lot of value here, and it's fun to see a trade of this size. Like for Scott, Scott has been going for it all year long, and I have so much respect for it. And the guy has the quarterback luck that he's had has just been brutal because like he traded for Kirk Cousins, he's hadn't done for years. Gets Geno Smith, he might miss this pivotal week. We'll see what happens there. Hopefully he gets in still, but this trade for this past week won him the week because he got Keenan Allen, who had a huge week and only won by like 2 points or less. And Keenan Allen is honestly this year it's got to be like a top 5 wide receiver for the year. So this is a big play there, and he is getting an early draft pick because he's giving away Brees Hall. And like Geno Smith and Keenan Allen aren't long-term dynasty assets. They should be okay for at least next year, so it's not like they're nothing. But Brees Hall is like a top 3, top 5 dynasty running back, young. Obviously, Dan is a Jets fan, so he's wanted to get him real bad. But next year, he should be hopefully a better season for the Jets, or at least Brees Hall. But honestly, this year, like Keenan Allen's going to score more points than Brees Hall is probably every single week, unless Brees rips off a long one. And getting Geno Smith with that was huge. Scott, obviously has an uphill battle, but he definitely has a path to getting into the playoffs. So I like this move for both teams.
Yeah, and it's like you said, you love to see it because Scott has not given up. He just keeps making the trades, keep
Yeah.
going for the quarterbacks. So we'll see what happens. I hope it works out for both of them. But yeah, big trade.
Yeah, it was huge. And then the big trades didn't stop. This one was pretty late at night. I think some people were probably at a bar when this one went down. I was about to get into bed myself. But so Crope traded. He traded away Justin Fields, Cole Kmet, and Roshan Johnson, just basically the Bears offense, and as well as a 2024 second and a 2025 first to Clark Sauce, and who they traded away Tyler Lockett, Debo Samuel, Kenneth Walker, and Will Levis. And this was before this past week the game started. Obviously, this is a win now versus play for next year type of move. But Ryan, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on in this trade. I think, it makes sense for both. Clark Sauce seems kind of like they're moving to tanking, and Crope is definitely trying to go for it this year. Giving up the Bears, based on this year, is definitely not a bad idea. They just have looked like a mess. Justin Fields looks okay here and there, but not even sure he's the long-term answer. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But, Clark Sauce did get a first round and a second round pick. So I think it makes sense. On the other side of it, Lockett has been performing pretty well. Debo Samuel pretty well. Walker, injured now, but has looked great otherwise. And then he's just getting Will Levis, I'm assuming, to replace Justin Fields in case he needs a quarterback who has had his ups and downs as well. So it's an interesting trade.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised by it too because I was actually targeting from Clark Sauce all three guys except for Will Levis because at this point, especially going into the playoffs and there's a couple buys coming up, you just want to beef up your depth at wide receiver and running backs just for the flex and make sure you're getting guys who could be productive. And these are all pretty high producing players. And I mean, Cole Kmet, solid. It's tight end premium. He's okay, but he's more a boomer bust. Roshan Johnson, I don't really think is anything. And Justin Fields, he's definitely going to be better than Will Levis, I think, this year. But as I mentioned, don't know what his future looks like. And Will Levis seems like he's going to be at least the quarterback next year as well. And he has some potential. He doesn't. He has some flaws, but he does flash some ability to throw some bombs accurately. So that's pretty exciting to see. So I liked it right when it happened. I liked the trade for Crope, but I do get the motivation for Clark Sauce. Now, obviously, Crope got a little unfortunate, at least for a week or two, with Kenneth Walker going down, who is probably the highest upside player in that trade for him. But Crope also has a pretty dominant team, and I'm pretty terrified of having to close out the season playing against him. But pretty big trade, and it's fun to see the teams going for it and the teams that aren't going for it rebuilding and really giving up some pretty massive value, which was very different than the final trade this week, which was all low value trash. It was Dan and Harry traded away their beloved Jet Zach Wilson to Schluter, who traded a 2024 third. So not a lot of value here. But again, this was before the game started and before the eventual benching of Zach Wilson. But Ryan, why don't you give me your thoughts?
I mean, give it to Dan and Harry. They literally could not have traded him at a better time. It worked out
Right.
perfectly for them. But yeah, from Schluter's side, he had Lamar Jackson, he has Brock Purdy as his starters. He had Huntley in case something happened to Jackson. He has Darnold, he has Walker, he has Mullins. So I guess he felt like he needed another depth piece at QB, but I don't think anyone thought Wilson would be a starter next year. So you're giving up a third round pick for depth the rest of this year. I don't fully get that. I think Dan and Harry, I mean, obviously now they definitely won the trade, but Schluter loves to trade. So you got to give him credit for always trying to make something happen.
I think I didn't talk to Schluter about it, but I think the main factor is Lamar has a week 13 bye, and Schluter knows he's trying to win out in these divisional matchups. So I think he just wanted a depth piece to throw into his second quarterback. But Purdy is his QB2, and that's a great combination. But yeah, he's going to be down a quarterback, and I think he's playing you that week too. So that'll be a tough matchup, but you don't have to worry about playing Zach Wilson, or maybe you would have preferred to. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I was going to say it might have been a benefit to play Zach Wilson, but no, I mean, he also only gave up the third. I mean, third round picks are generally dart throws, anyways, so it's not going to hurt him long term.
And honestly, Zach Wilson just seems like a guy who just keeps getting chances. So I wouldn't be shocked to see him start again at some point. Um, but obviously, I don't think it'll be by week 13. You never know, though. I feel like we have not seen it last of him. He won't go away. I don't know why, but there's just
Yeah.
certain quarterbacks just won't go away.
Yeah, I mean, he's being replaced by Tim Boyle, so there's definitely a chance that
Yeah,
doesn't
maybe
go well.
nah. Although I did think they made Zach Wilson the emergency QB3 for this week, which I didn't get to hear what Sal was talking about it yet. I saw it right before we started recording, but that's quite the blow to the ego. So we'll see.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh man! But moving on, we give a quick update on the high and low score. So high score this past week, back-to-back weeks, go to Chris Canellis. He put up 164.26, and the low score. So close, Rye. So close. The Laporta 2-point conversion is what put it over.
And
Adam Cohn and Katz put up 64.98 points, less than 2 points more than the low score set in week 1. And now we got 3 weeks left, and that record is still being held by our man Ryan here.
yeah, I think we're in trouble now. That was our shot. They had Justin Jefferson in who didn't play.
Gabe Davis.
They had a couple goose eggs. It was
the entire negative section that we just read off was
yeah, pretty much. It was looking like we had a good shot to be supplanted, but they just beat us. So I think we're in trouble now. I think next week there's a bunch of buys. I think that's our last real shot to have someone.
I mean, I want to point out how low of a score that was. Because, like, think of all the things that just happened, and he still just edged it out. Like, you need a lot. You need the whole team to go bad.
I literally think he had 2 or 3 goose eggs. So, and I don't feel like week 1 our team was that bad. We literally started Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, like, kind of crazy that it
I think each of them had, like, below, like,
it was the lowest they've had all year.
So. Yeah, I think they combined for like under 20 points. The two of them.
Yeah, it's just crazy. So yeah, we're in trouble.
Yeah, you are. But moving on, keeping it in the league, we're gonna give a quick update because now, as we mentioned, we're going into the divisional matchups to close out the season, and the winner of each division gets a playoff spot. So we're gonna predict what we think the final division order is going to end in. So we're going to go through from the first division, which is we renamed from Division 1 to team-mandated male masseuses because Deshaun Watson is in this division. And, Ron, why don't you tell me first what you think the order of this division is going to finish as?
Well, I'll start with the bottom because that's where Deshaun Watson is.
That's right.
I think fourth place will be Harry and Dan. What's under the towel? The first place, I'm going to give it to you, Dave. I think you have a 2-game lead, 3 games left. You should have a real good shot to take first place in your league.
The jinx is in.
Yeah, and then the middle is real tough. I think it's going to be super, super close. They're playing each other this week, so it's a huge, huge matchup. I'm going to give the slight edge to Scott and say Scott finishes second, Croak finishes third. Just edges them out at the end, but I think a lot of it all comes down to their matchup this week.
First of all, you can't talk about edging in this division. But no, I agree. I'm very much in line with you. I have myself in first, more so just, again, because of that lead. So, like, I could still – it's not a guarantee, but more things have to go wrong. So I keep myself in first, and I have Heron Den at the bottom. So it comes down to Crope and Scott. Right now I have Crope coming in second and Scott in third. And it comes down to really this week. I think if Scott wins this week, I think that, as you mentioned, there's a good chance that Scott comes out in second. But it's all going to come down to is Geno Smith and Cooper Kupp going to play. If they play, I think he has a pretty good chance to win. If they don't, it's good. He still can obviously win, but it's going to be a tougher uphill battle for him. But we'll see how that comes out. But this is going to be a very, very close finish. And both these teams are looking very strong to close out the season, which I hate because they're my last 2 games of the year.
Yeah, it's going to be a crazy 3 weeks for that division. I think the top and the bottom are pretty good, but the middle is very up in the air.
Slugfest. So we'll see. But moving on to Division Two, this is your division. So I'll jump in first and see what you think. So in fourth place, I have Joey coming in, although he gave me almost everything I could handle this past week. He was missing Pittman and Bajan. So he's definitely, even though he's coming in fourth, that's just based on his current, I think he only has 2 wins. I wouldn't be confident for any of you guys that are playing against him because he definitely put up points now. In third place, I have Adam Cohn and Katz, who are currently sitting on top and been in first place all year, but they have the least amount of points for right now and only have a game lead, and I think they're going to slide down if they lose a couple games to close out the season. Second place, I have the Wilkinson Bros sliding up out of the third place spot that they've been in for a decent amount of the year. They've been rising up. I think you've been on a win streak up until this past 2 weeks, so see where that goes. But I have Schluter finally getting out of the muck. We always thought he was one of the strong teams. I have him finally getting in first place. He's got the points for it. So if it's the same record, he's going to get that tiebreaker. And he looks like he's kind of clicking on all cylinders now when it matters. But what do you think, Rye?
Yeah, I did go with the same order. I think that's kind of how it's going to end up. Like you said, Joe, I actually do agree with you. I don't want to play his team right now, but unfortunately, he only has 2 wins, so he's going to finish last, and the tank is on for him.
Yeah.
The top three, I do still think anything can happen.
I agree.
It's close, but I think Schluter does finally take over first. He hasn't been in first all year. I think he's got the team, though, to do that. And then I think it's going to be real close between us and Adam and Katz, but I do think we'll hopefully take it by having a little bit more points for.
Yeah, I think you're playing Adam this week, so I think
We are. It's a big week too. Yeah.
Because if he wins it, then I think he has a good shot to keep the title in that division, and it would make it obviously harder for you to like get to the wild card. But the top three could finish up in any order. It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, for sure. We are playing them this week. Their team's been in free fall, but they do get Jefferson back this week, so we'll see.
But week 13 is rough for all three because Jefferson's on bye, you have Josh Allen on bye, and Schluter has Lamar on bye. And I think week 13 you're playing Schluter, as I mentioned too. So you're both without your top quarterback.
Yeah, anything can happen in this one still.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting to see. And then the final division, I'll jump in first. So in fourth place, I have Clark Sauce. They're selling out, so I don't think that surprises anyone. Third place, Canelos. I mentioned this in the league. He has an outside shot to still make the playoffs, but he has to win out and have a couple other things go his way and win big because I think he has to make up some points scored. But as I mentioned, he's been the top scorer the past 2 weeks, and his team is clicking all cylinders and no major buys going forward. Second place, I have Mike Caffer and Mike Williams. And this is purely because the top team, Brzezinski Bros, when they play each other, they're playing in week 13, and Mike Caffer and Mike Williams are going to be missing a ton of key players in that matchup. So I think the Brzezinski Bros are going to win that matchup, and that's going to be the defining week for this division.
Yeah, I have it similar, but I did make one switch. Like you said, Clark Sauce in fourth. They are tanking and, don't really seem to be planning on making the playoffs. Canelos, like you said, we saw it firsthand this week. He put up the top score. His team is actually on fire right now, but unfortunately at 4-7, he's got to win out, and he would need one of the top 2 teams to lose out. So most likely won't make the playoffs, so I'll put him in third. And then I flopped the first and second. I'm going with Mike Dexter as a god, finishing first, and Dan's team finishing second. I think it's going to be close, but I like Mike Dexter as a god's team. I think they're going to pull it out here.
It's a strong team. I think they have the most points in the
division. They do. They have the most points for. They're tied for record right now. Obviously, the week they play each other will be huge, but I'm giving the slight edge to them there.
Yeah. All right. Well, that means for you, we'll jump into you first. The automatic bids into playoffs is going to be myself, Schluter, and Mike Caffer, Mike Williams getting the top 3 bids. Who are your 3 wildcard teams you think are going to get in?
So first wild card team, Dan's team. I think if they do lose out to the Mikes, I think they make it as the first wild card spot. So I think either one of them is going to end up there pretty easily. And then the second and third wild cards are close. I decided to say that it's going to be Team Scott Rapizzotti and Team Craig Kropa. I actually think both of them might make it, all from division team mandate male masseuses. I think it could be us and Adam and Katz looking outside, but we'll see. It's going to be close between the four of us.
Yeah, I agree. And getting into it as a reminder of the three automatic bids that I have myself, I have Schluter, and the Brzezinski Bros. So the only difference here is the Division 3 bid. But for the first wild card, because I think Krope's going to end up beating Scott if Geno Smith and Cup are out. I think Krope's going to be the first wild card team in there. And honestly, if he wins this week, I think there's still an outside shot he wins the division. But I think he has a lot of points. He's dominated most of the year. He's had a little bit of a lull the past week, but I think his team is going to start ramping up again, and he would get the first wild card spot. Second one, I'm going to be putting Kaffer and Williams in. I think it's pretty much a lock that the top two teams from Division 3 are going to be in the playoffs. So I don't think there's any question there. And then the third wildcard spot, it's going to really just come down to points. I think there's going to be a lot of people with the same record or maybe a game off, but I'm giving it to you, the Wilkinson Bros, right now. I do think it's going to be a battle in Division 2, but I think if Croat wins this week, it's going to knock Scott too far down. I think you'll have a game up on him, so the points won't matter at that point. And then I think you'll get the edge over Adam Cohen and Kat. So I think you'll sneak in on that final playoff spot. But it's going to be close. It's definitely going to be a high, tense battle to close out the season.
Yeah, I think like you mentioned, the game between Scott and Crope is actually really huge for us as well, because if Scott somehow does slide into that second position in your league, then Crope could take the wildcard spot from us because he does have more points than us. So exactly. It's a big week for them and for us.
Yeah, and me, because if Scott wins and if I'm able to get a win, I automatically win my division, and I still want to win the last two games because I want that bye, but it will lock me into the playoffs in the top 3 seed. So the stress begins this week, so we'll see. Any other thoughts you have on our league or the season going forward?
Not really. Just a big week for fantasy, like we said. A lot of top teams are playing each other. That's going to have some pretty big playoff implications. So I'm excited to see how it plays out. And then, week-wise, Thanksgiving week. I hope everyone enjoys Thanksgiving and we all get to watch some football during it. So it's always good.
I agree. We're all off. I'm like the Black Friday game. Obviously, the Jets kind of stink versus Dolphins, but it is nice that you get kind of a game almost every single day. You get a little lull on Saturday to recoup. But it's going to be fun having 4 days of football out of 5 weekdays. So very excited for that. But again, good luck in your matchup to find a playoff push. And reminder in our league, the trade deadline is this week. So get those trades in. And if you're listening from another league, make sure that you're being aggressive and trying to get into that playoff. So thank you for listening to the pod. Hope you enjoyed. And good luck in your matchups and have a happy Thanksgiving.
Of the NSFW Dynasty podcast. Tune in next time.